Hi and welcome to CITAM Church Online, this being the Youth Cafe. My name is Patrick Kuchio, the Head of Missions at Christ is the Answer Ministries right here in Nairobi, Kenya. What a joy it is to continue this conversation on More Than A Statistic. Yes, you're right. We did observe from our previous conversations, previous messages, videos that God designed us to be more than a statistic. Those of you who just had imagined and had been persuaded, who had convinced themselves or had been convinced that you were just a mere demographic, a mere statistics in demography, I hope by now you're persuaded that God desires and designed you to be more than a statistic. We are looking at the life of a Bible character. His name is Jabez, tucked away in 1 Chronicles chapter 4, which is but a list of a genealogy of some clans from the tribe of Judah. And when you read from verse 1 to verse 8, you can very easily get bored. You're like, so what? This person begat the other person, and begat the other person, and was from here, had this number of children, these were the names of the children, so and so had 2 wives. So you're bound to ask yourself, so what? But the Spirit of God, the chronicler, the author of the book of Chronicles, when you get to chapter 4 verse 9, there is an interruption to the list by an account given of a man called Jabez. And when you read just his story from those 2 verses, you are left with some profound truths running through your mind. And we've seen, whereas Jabez was born an emblem of pain because his mother named him Jabez, which actually means pain, whereas he was born an emblem of pain, he died an emblem of honor. Because the Bible says in verse 9 of chapter 4 of the book of 1 Chronicles, now Jabez was more honorable than his brothers. And a couple of things that he did, we can only see what he did from the prayer he made, because the prayers we make are indicative of the people we are. Just listen in enough to a man and a woman praying, and you can deduct or deduce what manner of man or woman they are. So for a moment, let's eavesdrop on Jabez's prayer. His prayer is recorded in the scriptures. The Bible says, and Jabez prayed to the God of Israel, oh, that you'd bless me. Oh, that you'd enlarge my territory. Oh, that your hand would rest upon me, and that you'd keep me from harm, that I'll be free from pain. And the Bible says, and God granted his request. As you eavesdrop on Jabez's prayer, 3 things stand out for me. Number 1, he trusted in God. He trusted in God to change his narrative. He had been born into a painful, sorrowful narrative. But I'm so glad when he turned to God, when he trusted God, and he followed through by tearing down the limitations of this narrative he had been born into had limited him to. God is so amazing. The Bible tells me God granted his request. So anyway, Jabez trusted God, but number 2, he tore down his limitations. But number 3, what did Jabez do to change this narrative from pain to honor, from sorrow to greatness, from a mere statistic to more than a statistic? You know what he did? Number 3, he took his fears to God in prayer. He took his fears to God in prayer. He trusted God, yes. He tore down his limitations, but he took his fears to God. Jabez was up against fears that you and I are also up against. Particularly, it is a fact that to be born in some parts of the world is somewhat to be born condemned. It is true. To be born in some parts of the world, I must say, to be born in some parts of this lovely country called Kenya is almost equivalent to be born condemned. But you can do something about that. And Jabez did that. You know, I think of the many children who are born in vulnerable situations. I think of children who are born in very vulnerable circumstances. They have no access to clean drinking water. They have no guaranteed of, they're not guaranteed of a single square meal. They're not guaranteed of a nutritious meal. They're not guaranteed of an education. Their situation is bleak, almost hopeless. In fact, I've just returned from northern Kenya, where I went visiting some homes up in Samburu. And I remember going to visit these lovely people in Samburu in their homes, very simple homes called manyatas. And I remember being introduced to this 17-year-old girl who has been married off to a 44-year-old man. She's 17 and has 2 children. I looked at the situation and I asked, has this girl finished school? I was told no, she dropped out of school. She had to be married off because it's a cultural practice. It's somewhat close to cradle snatching because this is an underage girl. And I'm sure our government is doing something to address this issue of our young girls in the remotest parts of this nation being given off as children in marriage. This is unlawful, yet it continues. So this situation of this 17-year-old girl with 2 children, one is called Lovely and the other one is called Isaac. I prayed for these children and I prayed for this young girl and I called on God. I said, God, this is a hopeless situation, but please intervene. And there's something that I am doing about it. There's something that we will do about it to ensure that this particular family lives with hope, that these children are given a fair chance at life. But you know, it's a fact that to be born in some parts of this country, to be born in some parts of this world, is somewhat to be condemned. But I am glad we have a God in heaven who can change that bleak future, who can change that hopeless narrative. From the Bible, 1 Chronicles chapter 4, verse 9 and 10, Jabez did something about his fears. These are real fears. He took them to God in prayer. He took them to God in prayer. He asked that God would keep him from pain, that God would keep him from harm. The Bible says, and God granted his request. God granted his request. You know, it's one thing to trust God. It's one thing to believe in God. Even demons believe in God and they shudder, says the Bible. It's one thing to tear down limitations and barriers that keep us from breaking into whatever possibilities that lie before us. But it's another thing altogether to take those fears to God in prayer. This is exactly what Jabez did. What fears are you up against today? Is your health failing? Are you in a difficult relationship that that looks bleak? Are you going through a challenging experience at work? Are you going through a very difficult situation raising your children and it is hopeless? Are you a leader at the corporate world and you're like, I am not too sure. I know what Monday has in store for me. See, you and I may not know the future. And there are enough times when God intentionally keeps us from knowing what tomorrow holds, that we may trust him, but that we may also take the unknown to him in prayer. So whatever fear, whatever challenge you're going through this day, this time, this season, take it to God in prayer. Because God hears prayer. He heard the prayer of Jabez. He will hear your prayer coming out of an honest, sincere heart, mind, and spirit. and he will answer your prayer. God delights to answer prayer. He is not intimidated by the narrative you're bringing before. He is not intimidated by the past that you're coming from. He is not intimidated by the current situation. He is not intimidated by your current reality. He is not. I am so glad he is not. He invites us to take whatever realities to him in prayer. And he answers. He answers prayer. He answered Jabez's prayer. And Jabez moved from just a mere statistic to more than a statistic. He died an emblem of honor. My prayer for you is that you too will die an emblem of honor. But not just die, but that you will live through life as an emblem of honor. As you trust God to change your narrative, as you tear down those limitations, but as you take those fears to God in prayer. Involve God in those fears. Involve him in your life. Involve him in your narrative. Involve him in your situation, and you'll be surprised that God has always been waiting to be involved. You see, prayer is an invitation, is a human invitation to the divine intervention. And that makes the distinction. Prayer is a human invitation to the divine intervention, and that intervention makes the distinction. That is what Jabez learned. That is what I invite you to actually practice, because when the divine intervenes in the human, a miracle is in the offing. A miracle happens. The life of Jabez is but a miracle that is told to us in 1 Chronicles chapter 4, verse 9 and 10. And my prayer is that God will help you to also experience the miraculous. Regardless of your persuasion, miracles still happen on just an ordinary day like this one. So I invite us once again to engage, keep this conversation going on our social media platforms, on Twitter, on Facebook, on our YouTube channel. Please subscribe to our YouTube channel, CITAM Church Online, but also on Instagram. Please keep this conversation going. Slide into our DM. Don't be shy about it. Let us know what God is doing for you. Let us know how this message, this conversation has impacted you, and let's keep the conversation going. My name is Patrick Kuchio from the CITAM Church Online. This being the Youth Cafe. The Lord bless you richly. Be more than a statistic, because that's God's plan for you. Thank you.